What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of It's a Blast podcast. My name's Mike, also known as the EOD Happy Captain on X. Today, I'm sitting down with a leader who needs no introduction if you spend any time around the Army. He's a 16th Sergeant Major of the Army and the current CEO of Army Emergency Relief, Michael Grinston. Let's get started. Welcome to the It's a Blast podcast. My name is Mike. Here, I talk to members of the veteran and military community about their leadership style and how the military has affected their lives. Let's get started. What is going on? I am sitting down with the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army and the current Army Emergency Relief CEO, Michael Grinston. Sir, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first question I have to ask is, what do I call you?
Oh, I've only heard this about 1,000 times. So I like Tony. So that's my code name. Believe it or not, I'm Michael Anthony, and my mom called me Tony, and that's what I like to go by. So let's stick with that. Say Tony. Try it. See if you can do it.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard for me. I will tell you, in 2013, I was a young EOD staff sergeant in Afghanistan. And, we were in the middle of nowhere, right? Kind of an austere environment. We probably had a COP of about 75 people on it. And it was the middle of summer. I was running IEDs nonstop, and our AC unit went out. And so I would literally come back from a mission, and I'd have the medics standing by in the B hut, and they would hook both my arms with IVs, right? And then I'd go out and I'd do it some more. And I remember coming back from a mission, and the first sergeant was standing right there, First Sergeant Donovan, and he goes, hey, the brigade sergeant major was here, and I explained what a big issue it was, you not having air conditioning with all the missions you guys are running, and how you can't keep doing what you're doing. So he's going to get some people out here to fix your AC. And so I thought to myself, yeah, okay, right? I mean, we're getting like maybe one helicopter in every 2 weeks, right? And, I'm an enabler. I'm not a member of the 101st. I'm just an EOD guy, alone and unafraid in the middle of nowhere. But I tell you what, at 2 a.m, I got a knock on the door, and I literally thought we were getting another IED call, right? And so, I half delirious, I go and I open the door, and there are these 5 airmen standing there. And I look at them and I think to myself, well, we don't have any airmen on this COP, right? We're all Army here. And they go, hey, some sergeant major sent us down here. We're here to fix your AC units. And I said, yeah, come on in, right? They fixed my AC units. And then like a fever dream, they disappeared off into the night, right? And so, I've never really told that story publicly, but that was you. You were that brigade sergeant major who stood in my B hut when it was 115 degrees outside and said, we're going to fix this. And so I want to publicly say, as I do this podcast, thank you for doing that. You really saved my bacon there from burning. So thank you. Thank you for that one.
Yeah, if I'd known you were gonna, go to OCS, maybe I don't fix that AC. No, I'm joking. Of course, I've been known to do crazy things, and I'm sure there were no threats at all.
Yeah, no, hey,
you don't come back. I'm going to take your AC and never give it. You're going to have to sleep out in a cot, or you go fix that AC or something.
It was heavenly to have that air conditioning. So first and foremost, I tell that story because to me, you're always going to be Command Sergeant Major Grinston. So to say, call me Tony, I'm going to give it a try. It may not go well for me. I might slip back in. I think I can probably do sir for sure. But
well, if you're going to do that, you might as well just say Sergeant Major.
There we go. Okay. I got it. So, I want to start out by talking about your transition from the military into your role as the AER Army Emergency Relief CEO. You were very transparent about that on LinkedIn. And, I was following the story, and, you had applied for your first job, first interview, and you didn't get it, right? And I think for a lot of us that were watching, here is the senior enlisted person in the Army, 36 years of service, and got a first interview and a no. And so can you kind of talk about that process a little bit, that transition process, because you've said it before, whether you do 3 years or 30 years or more, we all leave the Army eventually. And so what was that process like for you?
Well, it's great. Believe it or not, even when I posted that, for me, it was just like, it was challenging and it was something, I really wanted to do. But I'll talk a little bit, about the process. We started, let's say, about a year earlier in August, not 20, 3, but 22. We went to the transition course. And I was like, I get really excited about going through the process, and you put some effort into it, and then you go back to work, and you're back to being the servant of Germany. You forget all about it. So it's like, the train keeps moving. So yeah, I'd like to say, you come back and you focus on it, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't. That was my job, to be the servant of Germany, and I wanted to give all I can to the end. And every once in a while, I try to do a little bit. So after I transitioned, I'm no longer in the job in August. Then I thought, okay, uh, what do I really want to do? And when you're retiring, I think it's a little different than when you're just going to get out. Is, for me, you have options. And I think everybody's going to have options, but when you retire, I think you just got a few more options, or eventually, at some point, you may not get a paycheck. Took a while. But you still have these options. But what I went through was trying to find out what I wanted to do. A lot of people say, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I don't know. I've been in the Army for 3.5 decades." so, um, I went through this, and then I found out there's certain things I'd really like to do. And I'm gonna be honest, I went through this, do I shoot for the moon or not? There's never been a CEO of AER who's been enlisted. There's never been a CEO of that other company, not to be named later, that I didn't get the job for. Never in the history. So what I had to decide, personally, was, did I want to set the bar here and go what other people have done? Or do I want to, go to do something that nobody else has ever done before? And clearly I went for the do something that no one else has ever done before. And that's what I would say to anybody leaving the military is, don't sell yourself short. At some point, they're going to tell you no, and that's okay. Don't get down. Although everybody started calling me on LinkedIn and stuff like that. I was like, I'm fine. I promise. To me, it was actually exciting. I was like, wow, I get told no. It's been a long time that, the survey no. So I just saw it as a challenge, and I didn't want to settle for something I didn't really, really want to do. And I wanted to set the bar really high so that maybe the next person sets the bar even higher.
No, I think you landed right where you're needed, right at the right time. I mean, we talk a lot about talent management in the Army, the right person at the right time. And I think you're there, so for someone who's listening who may not know what Army Emergency Relief is and what they do, can you give a quick, just synopsis of what you guys do?
Basically, we help soldiers, mostly active duty. There is some Guard and Reserve and their families, and retirees with financial readiness. If they're struggling to pay their house payments, if they're struggling to fix their car repair, get their car repaired. So we have 30 categories, and it's wide and deep. We do cranial helmets for babies. So it's like, wow, $350,000 at helping babies if they have a slight deformity when they're born. We did that last year. And so I like to say, as the new CEO, I said, we've got one category, and that's helping soldiers with financial needs. And if it's not a category now, maybe that's a category we need in the future. So don't be afraid to ask us.
No, that is absolutely awesome. Looking at the newsletter that just came out, 31,575 soldiers and families helped in 2023. That is an impressive number. And right now, I think it's important to do this interview because we're in the middle of the AER campaign, right, which goes until June. And so raising awareness, I will tell you, I made a comment on X, formerly known as Twitter, kind of tongue in cheek after I did an episode. And I said, well, who should I interview next? right? And the AER, whoever runs your social media does a fantastic job. And they said, well, what about our boss? And I thought to myself, like, well, that's terrifying, but yeah, absolutely. Right. Because, I've been contributing to AER for the last couple of years. And so I got notified that this interview was going to happen. And I said, well, let me go read about AAR, right? Let me go read AR 930-4. Let me go to the website. And I had this epiphany, which is I've been in the Army for 16 years. And if you had asked me, what does AER do? I would have said, well, they take care of soldiers. But if you had pressed me even a little bit, well, how do they take care of soldiers? I would have said, I don't know. And so in preparation for this interview, I talked to some friends in the military and the Army and said, hey, what do you know about AAR? And a lot of them said the same thing. Well, hey, I know that they help soldiers, right? And it was funny, I'm in a TRADOC company, so I have a lot of initial entry soldiers, officers. And I had a lieutenant in my office, and this man has been in the Army for 3 months, right? I said, hey, what do you know about AAR? And he said, yeah, they're fantastic. I said, well, what do you mean they're fantastic? He's like, well, how to use them. So you've been in the Army for 3 months. What do you mean you had to use them? He goes, yeah, I had some issues with my first paycheck and I contacted AAR, and immediately overnight I had money in my account to help make the stopgap and help make the PCS. And so, hearing those types of stories, and then doing a lot of just reading, trying to figure out what it is we do, mind blown, right? 30 categories. And so here's a question for someone who might be listening is, if I get a loan from AAR, what is the interest rate associated with that?
It's pretty simple, 0. It's like that was a softball.
It was.
We do only no interest loans, and we normally calculate, depends on what the interest rate, we can go up or down. But we said last year we saved soldiers and their families about $4 million with interest-free loans. It's just an incredible thing that we get to do. So again, if people are in need, and they, don't put that on your credit card. Go to AER, but you're right. They got to know about AER first. And that's why it's super important. Thanks for doing this podcast. And anytime we can get our message out that, we want to be the number one nonprofit of choice. And what I mean by that is when you have a need, you go to AER. It's armyemergencyrelief.org. It's just one big word. And right off to the left of the screen, you'll see assistance. You can click on that and get assistance. So even if you don't know about all the 31 or 30 programs that we have, the website should guide you to someone that can help you.
What about soldiers who are not on an Army installation? So for myself, I'm an Army guy. I'm on an Air Force installation. The closest Army installation for me is hundreds of miles away. What if I need support?
Well, actually, it's still relatively easy for you. We have a agreement with the Air Force Relief Society, the Navy and the Marine Corps Relief Society. So any base, it doesn't matter, that regardless of the service, to include the Coast Guard. If you're a military service member near a base, you can go to that base and they have a relief society there. They will help you. And then if you get money or a loan, they'll either get you to us or they will give you the money and they'll put it in the account and then we'll get the bill later. That's number one. Number two, you've got American Red Cross, another great partner for Army Emergency Relief. You can walk into any Red Cross worldwide and do the exact same thing, fill out any of the paperwork you have. The last thing is what we're really trying to get to is get our application all online. We're not there yet. The goal is to get that up by October so that you can go to, again, armyemergencyrelief.org, click assistance, and then start filling out all the paperwork. And then maybe you may never have to actually go in physically to see the Army Emergency Relief officer or Red Cross. And we could do some of that just right offline. Please give me till October. That's one of my goals for this year is to get that up.
I saw the goal this year is 10% participation, which hasn't been achieved since 2017. So last year, 2023, 6.5% participation amongst the Army. And so I would ask the question, how do we increase participation amongst members of the military? Gone are the days of stand in a formation and contribute, right? Not that that ever happened, but those days are
Never
gone.
did.
So,
Never did.
right, me neither. But how do we increase the participation to 10% this year?
I think it's just just telling our story. That's number one. The reason I said 10%, somebody said, in years past we said 100% informed, and I still imagine this happening. And somebody's already asked me this before. It's like, hey, can I just send out an email to everybody? Yeah, I guess. That's why you don't know about AER. It's like people will come up and go, hey, I'm telling you about AER. What are your questions? No questions. And now you, go back to your day. So increasing to 10% to me is about informing our soldiers of the benefits of AER. And secondly, it's about the chief's fourth focus area is about the profession. When you're part of a military organization, you're ready to go to combat, you're going to take care of each other. When another service member is in need in the Army, you can say, I can contribute it to that cause. And then, first of all, we have to really tell you what our cause is. And it's not just that I gave, a lieutenant loan for housing. Is when I was in El Paso about 2 weeks ago, they called me and said, we have an exception. There's a mother, and she needs cancer treatment. And she has insurance, but she can't afford the $2,500 copay. If she doesn't get that money by 1 March, she will not get her cancer treatment. That's where your money goes. That's what it means when you're part of a profession that is willing to make sure that not just you, but those family members around you get the money that they need for like a cancer treatment. That's pretty incredible. I've got a dozen of those stories, and I've only been here for 2 months. I probably got 36 years of other stories, but that's just one for the last 2 weeks. And that's not the only story I've received. So I think just telling our story about what we actually do, kind of grounded in with soldiers. And I say, if you don't want to give to that, don't give. If you hear that story and that didn't compel you to give, don't do it. I know it says the guy that wants to increase that to 10%, but I want you to feel like your money's going to a worthy cause. And I think when you hear the worthy causes that we do, I think you'd be compelled to give $1, give $1 or $2. Every little bit helps. And my goal is to make sure that I can do as much as I can with the money that we receive through donations.
No, I mean, that story, wow. Right. And so I've become much more attuned probably in the last 2 years to AAR. And so now every time I'm at the exchange, right, would you like to donate $1 to AAR? Yeah, absolutely. And then me and my wife, we make a contribution once a year as well. And just really a big part of that is just seeing all the stuff that I just was never aware that the organization does for soldiers, right? Because I always thought it was, there was a natural disaster, right? And obviously you guys help with that as well, but just, basic living, providing rent, initial deposits, you can't afford your mortgage, AER is there. Temporary lodging, AER is there. Funeral expenses for a family member who may not be direct family, AER is there, right? As a company commander, I can grant a loan with my signature for $2,000. I mean, like on the spot, right? The soldier brings me the form, I sign it, they submit it, $2,000 in their account. And so, seeing like everything that the program does, that the organization does, I had no clue. And so I think, exactly what you said, telling those stories, I think you're right. I think that is how the organization gets to 10%, because like I said, I've never been in a formation that we all had to stand there and do that, right? That never happened. But it missed the mark. It was, I am giving money because I want to go home, not because I want to help a service member. Reading through the regulatory guidance in AR 930-4, looking at the website, is there a plan to expand AER to the National Guard and Reserve? Because as of right now, it's 30 days on Title 10 orders before they're even eligible. Is there a plan to expand that, Sergeant Major?
The first thing I did was, I asked, I think it was a total of 56 questions. They just kept growing. I had a lot of questions when I started, and one of those is like, why don't we? Like, why not? We'll work through it, and some of the titles and authorities, with state, Title 30. So National Guard could be more complicated. So I'm not sure if we'll get that done or if we'll get it done this year. My goal is by the end of the year, beginning next year, pending, the board and what they say, is get at least the Army Reserve in there because they're already on Title 10 authorities. I think there's ways we could do that, but that's again, as the new CEO, that's just one. And I may not get there. I don't know. So I'll keep pushing. But one of the things you did mention, I do want to go back to, because I've heard this on one of my favorite social media sites, Reddit. So Reddit, I had this discussion, actually a pretty good discussion. I watched it. I didn't really comment. I watched the whole stream, and then all of a sudden there was, the F-bomb was dropped in, and then AER. You can. So, I how many times have I heard, here's the great things we do. I've also heard, well, you didn't help my friends, or you didn't do this. And normally I tell people, okay, well, why is that? And I was at Liberty, and I said, do you believe after 3.5 decades, I love soldiers? The answer is, your answer should be yes. If it's not, that's a different issue. I guess I got to talk. So, but if you believe I love soldiers, then why do you think I would tell people no? Because I have to. I don't have unlimited funds. Nobody does. We do have money, and our money makes money, and we have always given out more money than we have taken in. Always. But if we limit those things that we do, I would say to those that said, you told my buddy no, I think that maybe that's one more person I have to say no to if you don't contribute. So that's normally what I say, because I get that. I get that equally as much as they have no clue on what we do, is that I'm not giving because you told me no. And one guy was probably 20 years older than me. And when he explained to me that he would never give the AER because of, 65 years ago, somebody told him no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when people get it stuck in their heads a certain way, unfortunately, there's no way to change it. And then, they kind of spread that message. I will tell you that my eyes have been open, right? I mean, just doing the reading, and a lot of it in preparation for this interview, which in hindsight, I feel terrible about, right? Because I'm at 16 years and I'm just now figuring out, what all goes on. Let's talk about scholarships. The fact that military spouses can get a scholarship for their first degree, as can dependent children, right? What don't you guys do, Sergeant Major?
Not much. Like I said, we got one category, helping soldiers financially. We did last year. We did $9 million in scholarships.
Wow.
Believe it or not, there was a reduction. We were doing 12 million. We had to kind of balance that out. So we said, hey, we got to reduce a little bit. My spouse got a scholarship when I was starting first class from AER to help education. So, that's why I love my job. I get up and I smile and I think, it's too good to be true. So hopefully nothing bad happens, but I just enjoy it every day. I get to think of some new way to help soldiers and family every day. That's it. We hand out scholarships and we help, with like almost everything, 30 categories of like, oh, let's reduce that down. It's like, no, let's make it bigger. So we'll see.
Well,
It's great. I love it.
you had mentioned you are the first enlisted person to hold this job as CEO of Army Emergency Relief. And I've been watching via social media, right, as the campaign kicked off at the beginning of March, you traveling around the country, right, and still just getting after it, right? I think I saw you going for a run over at Fort Moore. Um, and so, like, if people are listening to this and don't know this, Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston is a fast runner. I've run with you one time. I was hurting. You went to the turnaround point. You shook everyone's hand. You took photos, and then you just continued mission. I think you were like the second person done, right? And so, seeing you out there with the force still, I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? Having the first enlisted person in charge of this company, like a man of the people, if you will, right, out there getting after it. On that topic, right, there's been a lot of reports lately, in the last couple of weeks about suicide clusters throughout the force and through some high op tempo units. And I know that when you were the Sergeant Major of the Army, you spoke quite frequently about suicide prevention, about doing buddy checks. I don't have the quote in front of me. I'm going to butcher it, but you said something to the effect of, if we're willing to do PT on our bodies and we're willing to, change the oil on a truck, why do we not do, checks on our mental health as well? And so given these articles that are coming out, what can we do as Army leaders to do better, right, when it comes to suicide prevention?
Yeah. This is a wicked tough problem. I know in 22 we had the lowest record in suicides that we had in a long time, uh, and then I think it was spiking a little bit in 23, and my goal was to keep it down at those 22 and still do lower. Unfortunately, you voted me out of office, and so I left. Didn't get the chance to see that through. Um, but what can leaders do? Uh, you got a lot more control over your life than you think you do, especially as a leader. You just have to use the authorities that you have. There'll be time to train. There'll be a time to change the track because we're talking about the 19 kilos. Uh, and then there'll be a time to change that engine. And then there's times not to do it. The leader has to be the one that says, now's the time not to do it. Everybody else is going to tell you it's got to be done right now. You got to be the one that says, not today. I mean, leadership is, the most important aspect to reducing suicide in the Army. And nobody will convince me otherwise. It's not a policy. It's not a piece of paper. It's not something else. It's a leader taking the time to care. And if you have a suicide, it's, we don't say it's only the fault of the leader. So there's the buddy, there's the family, there's all these other things. But when I think if you care about your people, you will do what you can to make sure that off tempo is appropriate. So I say that deliberately because it's never going to be zero. And so let's not fool ourselves. The Army's mission, last time I checked, was to fight and win the nation's wars, and that's always going to be number one. But is that number one today? So I've been in a mechanized unit. I don't know how many years, but off and on my whole career. And sometimes it's like you get this sense as leaders, like, oh, if I report that vehicle as in op, I'm going to be, fired as a leader. And most of the time it's not true. So, you're putting those unrealistic expectations on your shoulders. And do you have to? If you don't have to, then say, no, we're not going to do that today. We're going to do it at this time, and then stick to it. and it's up to you and all the leaders above you to kind of temper that I've seen this. Unfortunately, when we did a small group with four Cabazos, there was a first sergeant that said, I think they care more about the vehicles than they do me. Uh, that's the things that shouldn't be said. And, first sergeant of all people, you know what I mean? I was first sergeant. I just, anybody above me, I was like, well, that's mildly entertaining, but here's what I'm going to do in my unit. So I think I worry about the out tempo, and all leaders have to really pay attention with this. That's right. It is crucial. And what can we do to make that better? And sometimes we can't. I look at 1-3 of 1st Brigade, 3rd ID, comes back from Korea, and Russia invades Ukraine. Nobody told him to do it, so we had to send an ABCT over. But if you're not in that cycle, do you have to spend all the night or the whole weekend changing the track? Or I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But if you're a leader at brigade or division, you really have to meter that tempo, and you got to be aware that. Here's what I think it causes. That high up tempo puts a strain on the family. The wife's upset. You're gone all the time, and when you come back, you're still gone. You're physically sleeping in the bed, but you're not here. Then you're on another deployment, and then it just never ends. So she gets mad and she leaves. So now you're alone. She's in another state. You drink too much. You got throwing a weapon, throwing something else. Thinks you see your suicide rate goes up. So I think we really have to engage at all levels for up tempo. I believe it or not, I love my job as the Sergeant Major of the Army. We did have a family, and it was actually 1-3. And she came up to me. We talked about paying entitlements for those going over to, in Poland. And she goes, after it was all done, she comes up and says, I don't want your money. I just want my husband. So my husband just came back from Korea. He's over there now. And then here's his orders. And she literally showed me his order. Here's his orders for being on assignment to go to Korea. The good news is Sergeant Major Irving just called and said, okay. And then, you know what the HRC Sergeant Major says when you get that call?
Roger, Sergeant Major.
Yes. So it's like, he didn't say that for anybody else in the Army. So I just give you those examples of op tempo and how I feel about it. It's a little long, but it's super important.
No, it's incredibly important. I mean, I think, I spend a lot of time in the social media space, and that is a topic that consistently comes up with service members in the Army. Just talking about that, right? Incredibly high op tempo and just what they go through. Exactly what you said, right? Away from the family, and when you're home, you're not really with the family. Sergeant Major, before I say thank you for sitting down and talking with me, is there anything else you'd like to tell me about Army Emergency Relief that I may have missed?
No, I just want to emphasize one more time, Army Emergency Relief is here and when you need it. And even if you don't know anything about AER after 16 years in the Army, part of me is a little bit okay with that, not really, but the reason I say that is another story. This time I was on El Paso, and a staff sergeant said, I was really busy. I had a soldier who knew to go emergency leave. I just took him to AER, and they just took care of him. And, I don't know what you do, but they took care of my soldiers. The next day, he's on emergency leave. They helped him out with the travel and the money, and they got him where he needs to go. But he didn't know all about the programs. He just cared enough to get him to AER. And I think that's what I'd just like to close with is that even if you don't know that there's somebody there to help, get them to us. And that's a joy, is when you can say, I'm not sure what you all do, but you're taking care of that soldiers, and we took care of getting them to the right spot in the right time. That's what I've asked all the AER officers around the installation management command, is find a way to say yes. So when they come to us, we do whatever we can to help them. And then you may not know all the help. You just know that I got them to somebody at AER, and they just took care of them. And that's where I want for our organization. You may not be able to sit there and read the regulation, like, so, but just please rest assured that if you get them to AER, we're going to do our best that we can help soldiers. And
Hey, Sergeant Major Tony, thank you so much for everything you've done for the Army. Thank you for everything you continue to do for the Army. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
thank you.